Hi again, Professor Nachtomy. Now we are ready to listen to you. Just let me present you, and that would be all. Okay.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us well?
Yes.
Okay. Bueno, pues bienvenidos a nuestra segunda sesión del día de hoy, nuestra segunda conferencia magistral. Estará a cargo del doctor Ohad Nachtomy, quien es profesor en el Instituto Technion de Tecnología de Israel. Y, espera un momentito. Y nos va a presentar un trabajo titulado ¿Qué se siente ser un modo finito en una sustancia infinita? ¿No? Bueno, what is to be an attribute, a finite mode in an infinite substance. So we are really glad to listen to Professor Nachtomy today. And the floor is yours, the word is yours, Professor. You're welcome here. Thank you very much for your presentation in advance.
Well, thank you so much. I am I deeply regret that I couldn't make it to the conference itself in person. I was really disappointed. I really was looking forward to come to Mexico to this conference, but circumstances prevented me from coming, and so I'm still happy that I could join you via Zoom. I will try to make my presentation not too long. I hope it won't take more than 35 minutes, and then I'd be happy to open the floor for discussion. Let me see if I can share my screen with you. Okay, you see it? Okay. So let me start with a quick note on experience of infinity, which is a topic that is very dear to my current projects. So in the early modern period, Pascal articulated a memorable expression of the bewilderment and awe that humans felt facing an infinite universe, on both scales, large and small. This sense of finitude has been often cast as a mystical and religious experience in relation to the infinity of God. For Pascal, this recognition leads to a humbling conclusion that we are finite creatures that cannot grasp the infinite nature of God. In Spinoza, we find an incredibly interesting, original, and rational articulation of one sense of finitude in relation to the infinity of God. While a sense of the mystical is present in Spinoza's Scienza Intuitiva, his conceptualization is supposed to rest on a deductive method and a thoroughly rational process of reasoning. Furthermore, Spinoza's conceptualization is especially interesting since for him, the infinity of God is the same as the infinity of nature, where humans do not occupy any special place. Yet seeing this, that is, understanding our proper non-privileged place in the necessary causal nexus of nature, is crucial for achieving the aims of Spinoza's ethics, namely liberation from the passions and beatitude, by acting rationally according to our own nature. Thus, understanding our true place in nature and our own nature therein is the path Spinoza recommends and substantiates through the geometrical layout of his ethics. Yet a rational understanding does not seem to be sufficient in order to achieve the clarity required for freedom and blessedness. We also need to sense ourselves as finite modes of an eternal infinite substance. As Spinoza writes, we nevertheless feel that our mind, insofar as it involves the essence of the body under the species of eternity, is eternal. My emphasis here is on the word feel or sense. As Deleuze puts this point, the eternity of a singular essence is not an object of memory, nor of presentiment, nor revelation. It is rather strictly an object of actual experience. According to Spinoza, just like any other particular thing in nature, human beings are finite modes of an infinite substance, which is identified with God or nature. The implications of this observation are vast. We are not enduring substances, nor our souls are enduring substances. Rather, we are durational modifications of a single substance, which is infinite and eternal. This recognition is usually seen as a logical conclusion deriving from the axioms and definitions laid out in the ethics and demonstrated through the geometrical method. While certainly true to Spinoza's intentions and method, this leaves out an important open question, namely, just how can one sense oneself as a mode of an infinite substance? It is worth recalling that Spinoza expresses this relation in terms of love, an intellectual love of God, articulating the experience of sensing ourselves as modes of God involves, however, difficulties. For in Spinoza, knowledge of our adequate relation to God requires the third kind of knowledge, scientia intuitiva, which is directed to the essence of the body and is divorced from time and place. Yet experience is necessarily related to a particular time and involves a relation to a particular body. Without such an experience, however, it would be unclear how Spinoza's general theory of modes and substance could apply and relate to me as a particular mode and as a particular subject who seeks to see itself as a limited modification of an infinite substance. These are very preliminary formulations, but I hope you get the sense of the problem. My main objective in this talk is really to formulate this question as it arises in some of Spinoza's writings, mainly in the Ethics. While I may not have time to discuss possible solutions to this puzzle or this question, I trust that this will come up in the discussion, and hopefully you'll be able to point out where I went wrong and where we could see a way out from this question or from this problem. So I now turn to substantiate the background for this question, focusing on knowledge of our body, seen as a necessary condition for knowledge, as well as an object of knowledge, realizing its changing nature in the context of its embeddedness in a network of causal connections, and realizing our own body as belonging to such a network. So the there are two main sections. One discusses knowing the body through the second kind of knowledge, and the other section discussing knowledge of the body through the third kind of knowledge. And then I'll come back to this question. I start with some preliminary points of reference. So, as Spinoza says, the mind and the body are one and the same thing. We all know this. The mind is the idea of the body, or put inversely, the body is the object of the mind. Third, the mind is united with the body, as Spinoza writes in Ethics 2, Proposition 13. The object of the idea constituting the human mind is the body. Fourth, the mind does not know itself, except insofar as it perceives the ideas of the affections of the body. So this point should perhaps be stressed, that the mind doesn't know itself except insofar as it perceives the ideas of the affections of the body. This stresses the body as the necessary condition for knowledge. Fifth point, the idea of any affection of the human mind does not involve adequate knowledge of the human body itself. So it is not sufficient to acquire adequate knowledge. Like all bodies, the human body is a finite modification of God, expressed under the attribute of extension. As such, its existence requires an external cause. More specifically, the existence of the human body is conceived as an effect of many other bodies or other individuals, which together constitute the human body. The human body, Spinoza says, is composed of a great many individuals of different natures, each of which is highly composite. This is from Ethics 2, Postulate 1. Further, Spinoza asserts that to preserve its existence, the human body constantly, I quote, requires a great many other bodies, by which it is, as it were, continually regenerated. This is the postulate 4 to the second part of the Ethics. The human body then is constituted by many different bodies and involves a constant renewal of its bodily parts at any given moment. Due to the constant interaction and exchange of bodies that takes place between the human body and other bodies, the human body necessarily undergoes modifications. This implies that a human body only exists as modified, that is, affected in certain ways. And this is, Spinoza refers to this concept as the present constitution of the body. So you see that. According to Spinoza, the human body is not a mere collection of parts, but a unified stream of bodies. Spinoza argues that a human body understood as a union of body parts is not defined by the parts themselves, but rather it is defined by the specific proportion or ratio of interaction between them. He describes this interaction, I quote, as a certain fixed proportion in which the parts of the body communicate their motion to each other. This is the lemma to Ethics, Part 2. Furthermore, Spinoza clarifies that since the human body is a complex individual that can be affected in different ways, the perception of a single affection does not allow us to infer from it the other ways in which the body is affected. This is Proposition 27 to Ethics, Part 2. This implies that the single perception does not provide sufficient grounds to form a complete idea of the overall capacities and features of the body. Hence, the inevitable ignorance of some of our bodily features. Whereas an idea of an affection provides awareness of our body existing in a certain and determinate way, so that the human body exists as we feel it. It does not illuminate its causal origins and all its capacities. To be sure, there is nothing false in our ideas of the body's affections, as long as they merely report a variation in the body's constitution. Yet, in Spinoza's word, they are like conclusions without premises. They are confused ideas. In any event, they fall short of a complete picture of the causal network involved in the complex mechanisms of the body. of which we are only partly cognizant. So now I turn to discuss how we understand our body through the second kind of knowledge. Spinoza's distinctions between rational understanding and perception derives, and I quote, the nature of reason to perceive things under the species of eternity. The distinctive feature of reason is to perceive things under the species of eternity rather than under the species of duration. This also implies that the object of reason in this context is the common notions of things rather than particular things. The demonstration of this corollary adds, as you can see, the foundations of reasons or notions which explain those things which are common to all, and which, by proposition 37, do not explain the essence of any singular thing. On that account, they must be conceived without any relation to time, but under a certain species of eternity. Thus, it seems that whatever the mind can understand adequately without respect to the body would be abstracted from the body's duration. Spinoza states explicitly in Part 2, Proposition 30, that we can have only an entirely inadequate knowledge of the duration of our body. And we can have only an entirely inadequate knowledge of the duration of singular things which are outside us. This is in Proposition 31. At the same time, and this is what's so intriguing, our mind is constituted by our bodily affections. The very existence of the mind depends on the actual existence of our body, conceived through the common order of nature. After all, let us recall that mind and body for Spinoza are one and the same thing. Spinoza's explanation of why the mind wonders at the body, this is the example of sleepwalking, the famous example of sleepwalking, rests on two premises. First, the mind can only know the body through ideas of affections of the body. This is Proposition 19 of the second part. Second, ideas of affections of the body do not express adequate or complete knowledge of the human body, as in Proposition 27 of the second part, or any of its part, as he states in Proposition 24. Both claim depends on the way in which Spinoza conceives of the very existence of the human body. In Part 2, Proposition 13, Spinoza writes, corpus humanum prut ipsum sentimus existere. This is the second slide. So Curly translation reads that, the body exists as we are aware of it. Giroux's translation reads, le corps humain existe pour autant que nous le sentons. The human body exists as we sense it. This rendering suggests that the body's very existence is inseparable from assessing it. This also serves to emphasize Spinoza's commitment to the unity of mind and body. The body as such does not exist independently of the mind-sensing activity, since by definition, the body is related to its affections. Indeed, the scholium following the line in the following line, stressing that the mind and the body are one and the same, Spinoza says, from these considerations, we understand not only that the human mind is united to the body, but also what should we understand by the union of body and mind. But no one will be able to understand it adequately or distinctly unless one first knows adequately the nature of the human body. This is Proposition 13, the scholium to Proposition 13. Immediately after this proposition, Spinoza moves to his small physical treatise, aiming to clarify the nature of bodies. What exactly Spinoza means by the human body here? Does he have in mind the complex details about its structures, mechanisms, and functions that are not fully known to us? Indeed, the perception of the body through its affections raises further difficulties. Although the mind and body are two expressions of the same thing, they differ in their respective perceptions according to the nature of the attributes of thoughts and extension. In proposition 29 of the fifth part, Spinoza writes, whatever the mind understands under the species of eternity, it understands not from the fact that it conceives the body's present actual existence, but from the fact that it conceives the body's essence under the species of eternity. According to Spinoza here, the mind perception of the body's eternal essence is possible, but not in relation to time or the body present actual existence. It is a perception not of the affections of the body, but of its essence. Any perception of the body through its bodily affections, that is, its perception through the interaction it has with external bodies, implies that the mind perceives the body within the constraints of its finite duration. Okay, I'll now skip to the section of understanding our bodies through the third kind of knowledge. Scientific inquiry allows us to turn ignorance into knowledge through the second kind of knowledge. But what of the third kind? Spinoza clearly regards knowledge of the third kind as the highest virtue, where the mind can connect with its objects of understanding. In a sense, knowledge of this kind involves some sort of unification of the mind with God or nature. Intuitive knowledge of the essence of the mind and body is defined as an understanding of God. That is, knowledge of the mind and body's necessary existence as modes of God. The intellectual love of God that arises from this knowledge is the very love of God by which God loves himself. The second and third kind of knowledge involve adequate ideas, and both seek an understanding under the species of eternity. The way in which the second leads to the third, however, is not so clear. Reclaiming the importance of the body through the second kind of knowledge, by experiencing it as a manifestation of common properties, is perhaps easier to accomplish. But is there a place for comprehending our bodies in the third kind of knowledge? This would involve an experience which relates to the mind without relation to the body, as he writes in the fifth part in the scholium to proposition 20. Through ratio and scientia intuitiva, we seek to obtain eternal and necessary truth. The second and third kind of knowledge differ from each other by the aspects of the objects which are known. In the second kind, the relevant aspect is the common properties of things. In the case of scientia intuitiva, the relevant aspect is the essence of things. Given that, according to Spinoza, the mind cannot have full knowledge of the body's causal history, its overall mechanisms, and its capacities, what are Spinoza's reasons to claim that we can have adequate knowledge of our body? As he states clearly in the fifth part, proposition 23 and proposition 29. The third kind of knowledge pertains to cognition under the species of eternity, which is divorced from time and duration. In light of this, we can raise the question again, how can we obtain such knowledge? From Spinoza's remarks, concerning the ignorance of our body's structures, as mentioned in the third part in the Scholium to Proposition 2, one might conclude that adequate, complete knowledge of our body would correspond to complete understanding of the body's anatomy and physiology. This would be an understanding of our body according to its common properties with other bodies and as a particular specimen of a general species of bodies. It would seem that knowledge about the facts of the body, understood as an object available to external observation and scientific inquiry, would bring about parallel knowledge of facts regarding the mind. This kind of approach towards the study of the human body is stressed by scholars such as Raven, Damasio, Nadler, and Atlan, who see Spinoza as a precursor, in a certain sense, of contemporary neuroscientific studies. Spinoza clearly emphasizes the importance of knowing the structure and functions of the human body, not only as a remedy against false beliefs, such as having free will, but also as an antidote against other errors. For example, knowledge about optics can explain phenomena related to sense perception, such as optical illusions. The scientific approach is clearly related to the second kind of knowledge. In the preface to the fifth part, however, Spinoza clarifies that scientific knowledge of the body is not the ultimate goal of philosophy. As he writes, it does not pertain to this investigation to show how the intellect must be perfected, or in what way the body must be cared for, so that it can perform its function properly. The former is the concern of logic, and the latter of medicine. According to Spinoza here, perfecting the body and intellect are not the goals of philosophy. These goals pertain to medicine and logic. Indeed, in the Ethics, Spinoza does not seek to provide full-fledged account of the human body's physiology. Instead, he's limiting himself to something like what Raphael André calls a negative heuristics of the laws of bodies. Spinoza is restricting his analysis to the general principles that any scientific inquiry must not contradict. He regards this sketchy account of a human body as somehow sufficient, I quote, to lead us to the knowledge of the human mind and its highest blessedness. This is in the preface to the second part. Further, in the preface to the fifth part of the Ethics, Spinoza writes that an analysis concerning the power of reason against the effects, which constitute, I quote, the means or way leading to freedom, end quote, can overlook medical knowledge of the body. It seems, therefore, that on Spinoza's account, one can understand how to attain supreme good even without having a complete scientific understanding of one's body's composition, its physiological architecture, and metabolism. Is this because the highest blessedness and virtue can only be attained through the third kind of knowledge and an understanding of the essence of the human body rather than its specific capacities and mechanisms? Perhaps, and yet the repeated mention of the body in the context of discussing the third kind of knowledge is intriguing. This leads to the second approach to the question of obtaining knowledge of the body through the philosophical reflection. Daniel Garber, for instance, stresses the transition of knowledge of the body through, stresses the transition to knowledge of the body through the third kind. Garber writes, as we approach beatitude and knowledge of the third kind, we come to a very different conception of the mind and body than the one derived from sensation. The characteristics of Spinozistic adequate knowledge of the self, that is, scientia intuitiva, would admittedly remain elusive, Garber writes, yet it would yield a different and deeper knowledge than one provided by the senses, and would allow us to know ourselves without the senses. On this reading, it is unclear whether adequate knowledge is to be considered independent from the knowledge of our body that we obtain by having ideas of our body's affections. One of the important clues as to whether the third kind of knowledge can be related to time, and therefore whether an understanding of the essence of the body has something to do with its affections, lies in Spinoza's characterization of the intellectual love of God. As he writes, from the third kind of knowledge, there necessarily arises an intellectual love of God. For from this kind of knowledge, there arises joy, accompanied by the idea of joy as its cause. That is love of God, not insofar as we imagine him as present, but insofar as we understand God to be eternal. And this is what I call intellectual love of God. This type of love, although superficially designated an effect, is not a change in the mind. Spinoza retains the word love here because it provokes useful connotations for the reader. But the state of blessedness brought about by the intellectual love of God is not a change per se. In the fifth part, proposition 33, Spinoza states, the intellectual love of God which arises from the third kind of knowledge is eternal. The Scholium explains that love in its eternal manifestation, attached to God insofar as he is understood as eternal, is not precisely joy, but rather blessedness. Spinoza holds that the third kind of knowledge and the intellectual love of God are detached from existence and understanding under an aspect of duration. They are related only to existence and understanding under the aspect of eternity. Consequently, it appears that the third kind of knowledge involves some understanding of the body that is not related to its finitude as expressed through its temporal and spatial existence. The mind's eternity, or its necessary existence in God, pertains to the essence of the body rather than to its affections. Understanding the body via the third kind of knowledge implies understanding its necessary existence as mode of God, with God as its immanent cause. The body's affections, inadequate as they are, can lead to imagination, but not to true understanding. As Spinoza explains that if we attend to the common opinion of men, we shall see that they are indeed conscious of the eternity of their mind, but that they confuse it with duration and attribute it to the imagination or memory which they believe remains after death. Eternity of the mind, perceived inadequately with relation to time, engenders idea of eschatology, reincarnation, and the afterlife. However, even if for Spinoza scientia intuitiva does not involve bodily affections, this does not reduce the importance of knowledge of the body. On the contrary, an understanding of the specific ways in which the first kind of knowledge and consequently knowledge of the body's affections is inadequate is crucial for the advancement of cognition and the emendation of the intellect. It is not surprising, therefore, that Spinoza returns to this issue after the discussion of blessedness and the eternity of the mind. As he writes, he who has a body capable of doing a great many things is least troubled by evil effects. That is, by effects contrary to our nature. So he has a power of ordering and connecting the affections of his body according to the order of the intellect, and consequently of bringing it about that all the affections of the body are related to the idea of God. As we can see in this passage, the capability of the bodies are measured by the mind's ability to order, that is, to understand its affections. Although the ideas of bodily affections can also give rise to harmful passions, which can cloud our judgment and make it harder to exercise our intellect, the ideas of bodily affections are also indicators that we are modes of God, an integral part of nature. Understanding these ideas as best as we can through their common properties via the second kind of knowledge, and ultimately through scientia intuitiva, is the only path to blessedness. The fact that our body cannot be adequately known to us under the aspect of duration should not deter us from the intellectual endeavor. As Spinoza writes in the short treatise, scientia intuitiva is not a consequence of anything else, but an immediate manifestation of the object itself to the intellect. So if we come to know God in this way, then we must necessarily unite with him. I do not say that we must know him as he is. It is enough for us to know him to some extent in order to be united with him. For even in the knowledge that we have of the body, we do not know it as it is, or perfectly. And yet, what union and what love. So let me now quickly summarize this point. I'm very close to the end. As we have seen, a study of the mind is bound with the affections of the body. Attaining adequate knowledge requires that we experience our bodily affections. It would seem, therefore, that any adequate knowledge obtained either through scientific methods or through philosophical reflection is necessarily related to experience. Indeed, as we have seen, for Spinoza, the body, as the object of the mind, is a necessary source of individual experience. The perception of the body as the locus of affections deriving from the interactions with external things may also serve to reveal our adequate place in nature, and thus our true nature as fluid center of affections on the one hand, and as a necessary node in the global framework of nature on the other. For this realization to take place, however, we need to experience ourselves as finite mode of an infinite substance, both extended and perceiving, modes that are transient and fragmentary on the one hand, but also necessary and inherent aspects of God or nature on the other. This linkage is a perspective that could lead us to acquire adequate knowledge of ourselves through perception of our body, and thus could lead us to a perception of our true place in nature. In the context of Spinoza's metaphysics, this recognition also comes with a sense of being an integral aspect of God or nature, and an understanding of occupying a necessary, and in this sense, eternal place within the causal and logical nexus of nature. So let me quickly get back to my original question. Since the body is the source or locus of the mind's affection, recognizing myself as a finite mode of an infinite substance requires that I experience myself, and more specifically my body. Thus, on the one hand, sensing myself depends on my experiencing some bodily affections Sensing myself depends on my experience some bodily affections. On the other hand, coming to know my body as a finite mode, and moreover, as a finite mode of an infinite substance, require perceiving myself adequately. Obtaining such adequate knowledge, however, seems to require detachment from particular time and place so that I can understand the essence of the body, subspecies eternitatis. The question is then how to describe such an experience of myself as a finite mode in Spinoza's framework. It seems to require both relation to the durational body and seeing it under the aspect of eternity as timeless. And so this is the kind of complex question that I want to, that I tried to formulate here. And I think I'll stop here, and then we can discuss solutions to this question in the Q&A.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Professor. For the Q&A, we will do some translation. So some of the audience only speak Spanish, but we have. Okay. So the Q&A is apparently canceled due to time issues. So thank you so much for your presentation again, and we'll see you hopefully next time. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
So the session is ended, is closed.
Yes, it seems so. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, and
Bye-bye.
thank you so much. Yeah.